In the annals of CIA history, there are numerous accounts of strange and inexplicable occurrences, but few are as chilling as the tale of the Phantom of the Hanoi Hilton, a story whispered among operatives and declassified only recently, leaving many to wonder what truly haunts the shadows of America's clandestine operations. During the Vietnam War, the Hanoi Hilton was the infamous nickname given to Hue Lo Prison, where American prisoners of war POWs were held under brutal conditions. Tales of torture, deprivation, and psychological warfare are well documented, but one story stands out as particularly unnerving. In the late 1960s, a CIA operative, referred to in declassified documents only as Agent X, was captured during a covert mission in North Vietnam. Like many others, he was taken to the Hanoi Hilton, where he endured unspeakable suffering. However, Agent X had a reputation as being mentally resilient, a man whose psyche could not be easily broken, but something else did. The story goes that after weeks of isolation in a tiny, dark cell, Agent X began to notice strange occurrences. It started with whispers, faint and unintelligible, just on the edge of hearing. At first, he dismissed them as tricks of his mind, the result of extreme stress and exhaustion. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct, until he could make out words, his name, repeated over and over. Then came the footsteps, soft at first, as if someone was pacing the corridor outside his cell, but no one ever appeared. Guards denied hearing anything unusual, and his fellow prisoners were too far away to be responsible. The footsteps grew bolder, closer, until it seemed as though they were right inside his cell. But when Agent X would look, there was nothing, just the suffocating darkness. One night, the footsteps stopped, replaced by something far more terrifying. As Agent X lay on the cold, hard floor, trying to sleep, he felt a presence in the cell with him. A cold breeze swept across his face, though there were no windows or vents. Then, out of the darkness, he saw it, a figure, faint and translucent, standing in the corner of the cell. The figure was of a man, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through Agent X. He was dressed in tattered military fatigues, though they were not of any uniform Agent X recognized. The Phantom's face was twisted in an expression of pain and despair, and as Agent X watched in horror, the figure began to move toward him, its mouth opening in a silent scream. Agent X scrambled to the far side of the cell, pressing himself against the wall, but there was no escape. The ghostly figure advanced, its eyes locked on him. Just as it seemed the apparition would reach him, it vanished, leaving Agent X alone in the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. For weeks, the figure returned night after night, each time growing more solid, more menacing. The whispers now echoed through the cell continuously, a cacophony of voices that drove Agent X to the brink of madness. He tried to communicate with the apparition, to understand what it wanted, but the ghost offered no answers, only fear. Finally, one night, the figure spoke. In a voice that was both a whisper and a roar, it said, "You will join us," that was all. After that night, the figure never appeared again, but the damage had been done. Agent X was never the same. When he was finally released from the Hanoi Hilton in a prisoner exchange, his colleagues noticed a marked change in him. He was a man haunted, not just by the horrors of war, but by something far worse, something he could never fully explain. Years later, after his retirement, Agent X confided in a fellow operative about his experiences. The story was so disturbing that it made its way into CIA folklore, eventually being recorded in a classified file. The official stance was that Agent X suffered from extreme PTSD, but those who knew him best believed something more sinister was at play. When the file was declassified decades later, it reignited interest in the paranormal possibilities of what had happened in that cell. Some speculated that the ghost was a former POW, a man who had died in agony and whose spirit remained trapped in that hellish prison. Others believed it was something older, something malevolent that fed on the suffering of the living. Whatever the truth, the Phantom of the Hanoi Hilton remains one of the CIA's most chilling and mysterious cases, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of human conflict, there are things we cannot fully understand, things that may never rest.